They did not want the fatty fats shopping at Old Navy, so they made sure to change that. You guys, they're so obsessed. They needed fat people to stop shopping at Old Navy because it was going to make it not cool anymore. And if that is an irony, I don't know what is. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am so excited to have you all here again with me this week for even more internet shenanigans. If you are new here and this is the first time you are seeing my face, welcome. My name is Sam and I make weekly videos dissecting internet nonsense, so if you're into that type of thing or you like today's video, I hope that you'll consider liking and subscribing. It really helps out the channel and makes sure you never miss another upload from me. Last week, while I was up to my eyeballs in fat talk content to make the video about how plus-size fashion influencers are killing ethical plus-size fashion brands, I stumbled across a few clips that I felt just couldn't be ignored. And every single one of them included fat activists hating on women, but more specifically, thin women. These clips were dripping with resentment, and the hatred was the same as always: projection, contradiction, and above all else, a mostly comical case of main character syndrome. Today, I want to share these clips with you all because honestly, they're just too good not to talk about them here on the channel, so let's just get right on into it. The first clip comes to us from MMFR, and girl has been a mainstay on the channel here for just about a month because she cannot stop getting into internet shenanigans. And in case you missed it, she is a creator who is known for trying to overwhelm her naysayers with citations, and they're citations that she's often misrepresenting. So I have a video on that if you'd like to watch it. But also, just last week, she was included in the video because she went out of her way to defend companies and say that plus-size people have to buy clothing made from these companies that utilize child labor. When I was reviewing her content as part of last week's conversation about plus-size clothing, what I ended up finding was a clip of her talking about the reasons why she believes Old Navy has stopped carrying plus-size clothing in their retail stores. And she has a very interesting take on that situation.
A lot of brands don't want to expand past the size 20 because their straight size customers feel alienated and no longer feel like the brand is cool because now it is associated with larger bodies.
So this is Grizel, the owner of Reb Dolls, if you are unfamiliar. But for all you people who think that, plus sizes just don't sell, or it costs too much to add all that fabric, or whatever excuses you have been giving us, this is the reason. So anyway, she is looking for investors to expand her brand, and she met with a brand, and this is the reasoning that they gave her. Brands don't want to expand because straight size people don't want to wear the same clothing as plus size people, because once that happens, it's not cool anymore for fat people to own the same clothing. That's why. And that's actually the reason why plus sizes got pulled out of Old Navy. If you read between the lines in that original New York Times article, that's what they were actually saying. Straight sizes got mad that they couldn't find their stuff in store, and they were mad that plus sizes were, in the same style, and people were actually buying the plus sizes, and that's why they got pulled. The thins are mad.
Man, this just never gets old for me. We have already talked in depth about the way MMFR will just blatantly misrepresent citations that she's trying to use. But even here, if you go back and look at Grisel's video, the one that she stitched at the beginning of this, Grisel did not say that she was talking to a brand who said this was the reason they didn't want to expand. She was talking to an investor who was giving their opinion on why they think brands don't want to expand. But even then, it's kind of funny because there are a lot of clothing brands that have expanded into plus-size clothing. So it's only those select few who are being a little bit nitpicky And we know who they are, right? They've outed themselves. This is not new information. But here we have MMFR once again misrepresenting that conversation to make her point. But what really gets me out of this whole thing, honestly, is the fact that she is blatantly admitting that she does not believe that multiple things can be true at once. Because she uses that and calls them excuses to basically boil it down and say it's not possible that it's because the clothing is more expensive because there's more fabric and more design that has to go into it. Or it's not possible that even the plus size clothing wasn't selling the way that they anticipated. No, none of those things can be true. What happened, according to MMFR, is that thin people complained and then Old Navy backtracked and took their plus sizes away. There's no other reason. We've narrowed it down to solely that. It is thin people's faults. They cared so much about Old Navy carrying plus sizes that they called the company to complain. It is 100% their fault. There's absolutely no way that Old Navy figured out that it was just costing them more money to produce the clothes and that actually maybe they hadn't done enough market research to know how much inventory they should be carrying of each size. Can't be that. It's only the thins who are to blame. And again, I just need to point out how asinine this conversation is and this argument is, because we're talking about Old frickin' Navy here. Old Navy. We are not talking about some luxury snobby brand who has had a CEO come out and say, we don't want to make plus sizes because that makes our brand not cool. Old Navy has been doing plus size clothing for as long as I can remember. And as a plus size woman who was also a plus size teenager, I have been able to shop Old Navy in and out of stores intermittently all the way through the 2000s to now. So again, we're talking about Old Navy here. As per the usual with these type of videos, it gets better, as you can imagine, because we see her saying at the end of her video that if you reread that New York Times article and you read between the lines, it's so blatantly clear that it was thin people's fault. They were so mad that they weren't finding their sizes online that clearly they complained. Well, the thing here is, and you all know this by now, if you give me a citation or a place to look for what you're saying, I'm gonna do it. So I went to the New York Times website and I was digging and digging, and the only thing that exists on their website related to Old Navy backtracking is an opinion piece. An opinion piece written by a textile artist, not a person who works in fashion or runs a fashion brand. I swear to God, you cannot make this stuff up. Now, there was actually a really good article that was published by Fast Company, and Fast Company's article does actually explain the issues that Old Navy faced during its launch. They didn't have enough information about how much inventory to buy for each size and ended up having to heavily discount both smaller and larger sizes because they kept having a surplus. They did not see the returns that they wanted and lost so much money in their Q1 reports that the CEO stepped down just 2 years into her role. This article even does a great comparison discussing how one of the most inclusive brands that does get MMFR's praise has successfully implemented all of their sizes in their retail stores, but the piece that she seems to ignore is that they did it so slowly, and they also adjusted their sizing so that their size medium is a size 18, which is their standard customer size. Because for most brands, a size medium is a size 8. It didn't happen overnight, even for these brands who have been successful in implementing this in retail stores. There's a learning curve, and no one is going to get it right off the bat. But ignore all of that, I guess, because clearly thin people, specifically thin women, they were the problem. They did not want the fatty fats shopping at Old Navy, so they made sure to change that. You guys, they're so obsessed. They needed fat people to stop shopping at Old Navy because it was going to make it not cool anymore. Now, as I continued digging, just kind of looking into last week's topic, I found another woman who was using thin people as a scapegoat to excuse the fact that fat people shop fast fashion.
If you all start buying up plus-size clothing just to do this, you cannot then complain that plus-size people buy fast fashion. Is that clear to everybody? Are we all on the same page?
Ooh, the disdain that is dripping off of this video. This is something that this creator is known for, but my God, the hate is clear with this one, okay? It's very strong with this one. I want to talk about how in this video, she is basically arguing that if thin people never shopped for any plus-size clothing in thrift stores to do trends like this, that fast fashion wouldn't exist. Fat people wouldn't have to buy fast fashion if it weren't for thin people being terrible. That's what this argument basically boils down to. And what's interesting to me here, when you really start to think about it and sift through exactly what she's trying to say, it's kind of this weird defense mechanism, I guess, that humans have developed where they're trying to distance themselves from doing this thing that makes them feel guilty, or that they feel like they shouldn't be doing because they know it's bad, or because there's some societal pressure telling them that they should not do that thing. That's exactly what they're doing with fast fashion. We know it's bad, but we have to do it. And the reason we have to do it is because thin people are stealing our clothes from thrift stores. That is just absolutely bonkers. It doesn't matter if thin people are shopping in thrift stores or not. Fast fashion is going to exist. The same way McDonald's exists. The same way Starbucks continues to exist even though people are actively boycotting. The same way that Amazon exists even though every other year we're supposedly actively boycotting that. We can say these things as this defense mechanism, but if we're still going home and ordering from these businesses, they're going to continue to exist. Fast fashion would not exist and would not keep cropping up out of nowhere if people weren't demanding it. Thrifting and ethical business practices have existed side by side for a really long time. And there's probably really not an easy way for us to get rid of them, right? Some people just need to shop for convenience. We talked about that last week. Sometimes it's about budget, sometimes it's about convenience, and that's okay. But rather than just saying that, sometimes I need to shop for convenience and that's why I shop fast fashion, this creator chose instead to say, well, I have to do that because thin people are taking my clothes out of thrift stores. It's a very weird approach to blame thin people for the reason that you're choosing to do something that you feel guilty about. I'm just saying. But anyway, let's keep going because I saved the best for last for you all, as I always do. I absolutely hate the argument that fat people can never find clothes in thrift stores because thin people are taking all of the clothes. This is a story we have heard fat activists use over and over and over again throughout the years. Thin people are the reason that they can't thrift, okay? That story, every time we hear it, is almost always immediately contradicted, either by themselves in the same content, mind you, or by one of their peers. As Exhibit A, I offer you Fat Fab Feminist, also known as Victoria, who made a video not too long ago where she was ranting in her car about the reasons that she gets mad at thin people when she is trying to thrift.
Side note, this is also why plus size people get mad at thin people who take plus size clothing from thrift. Because like obviously it's a thrift store, first come first serve, whatever, do what you want. But also there's so little of it that actual plus size people can't shop at thrift stores. Which sucks.
And yet, within this very same video, she says this.
But the clothes are also not made well. Like plus size people often don't really get good quality like options, you know? So they're just like, of course they're gonna run through quickly, especially if you're wearing them often.
That's interesting, isn't it? Again, in the same video. But let me give you Exhibit B before we get too deep. I want you to see what MMFR has to say about this very same topic.
I have tried online thrifting. I have. plus size people wear our clothes until they literally fall apart. We don't just like get rid of them to get rid of them. So that's why it's hard to find plus size items in thrifting, even online thrifting. So like I've been to online thrift shops that carry plus size items. I have very rarely seen items in sizes 24 and above. I'm a size 26 on the bottom. And also very rarely have I seen things, if they do come in that size, which is already very rare, it is even rarer that I see something that I'm like, oh, that's really cute. I would buy that. I would actually wear that. So you're literally telling me that that's our only option. That's what we should stick with.
So which is it? Are there no plus sizes in thrift stores because the clothes are made with poor quality and fat people are having to wear them until they fall apart, which means they're not ever making it to the thrift store? Because it sounds to me like they've both just argued that in a logical way. I know, mind-blowing. But somehow, at the same time, both have looked at that logical argument and they've said the words out loud and published them on the internet. They were so close to getting it. And then yet and still they both went this way and said, no. That's not the reason. That's not the reason. It's thin people. There is a whole lot of blame being put specifically on thin women once again. Which absolutely tickles me, by the way, because in both of their videos, they end up sharing that in one way or another, they are both hoarding clothing because they live within this scarcity mindset. They've convinced themselves and they're convincing their audiences that there are not enough clothing options out there for them that they need to buy in mass quantities. And Victoria even did it while saying that she's anti-capitalist and doesn't support overconsumption. But she has to overconsume because what if she can never get that velvet dress ever again? It's ridiculous when you actually sit down and listen to it. And in my opinion, hearing both of them say that they hoard clothes is very interesting to me while they're talking about there being no plus size clothing in thrift stores. Because it sounds like the clothing that's probably just rotting in their closets would be perfect to put in a thrift store for somebody to actually use. Does that not make sense? I never understand how they're so close to the answer and yet still so far away. It honestly blows my mind. Why are you just sitting on clothing you never intend to wear? Why would you not put that in the thrift stores and therefore solve your own freaking problem? Because maybe if you did that, other people would start doing that and it would create a domino effect. I swear, y'all, it's not that hard. It's not that hard. And I do appreciate that MMFR did also admit that she just doesn't enjoy thrifting because it's not a win every time, and sometimes she can't find clothing that she thinks is cute. That's fine. Thrifting is thrifting. It's a patience game. You're not going to find that perfect piece of clothing every single time you thrift. That's kind of the joy that people get out of it, right? Is finding that diamond in the rough. If you don't want to do that, the same way I wish the other person had just said, sometimes I like to shop for convenience, that's okay. You can admit those things without then blaming it on thin people. It's not the thin person's fault that you want to shop fast fashion for convenience. It's not the thin person's fault that you don't have the patience to thrift. Just say that. I don't understand why it is so hard for them to do that. It makes me wonder if they can't hear themselves. Do they not hear the things that they're saying? And then I remember that almost every single person who has come into contact with this fat activist and body liberation and body positivity movement online, a lot of them that make this content seriously suffer from main character syndrome. There are so many videos of them saying things like, I'm going to do this basic thing because it makes thin people angry. And they truly believe it. They think that them just getting dressed in hot weather makes thin people angry.
Here comes the whore. Hello.
Sometimes they even say things like, well, I'm gonna put this outfit on and make my body everyone else's problem.
One thing about me is that if it's over 80 degrees out, I'm gonna put on a slutty little outfit and make it everyone else's problem.
They also think that them wearing a bikini makes thin people angry.
Now this is a bikini body. I'm ready to go piss some people off at the beach.
But here's the thing I want to leave you with today. That is this thought that every single time I have come across these women who are wrapped up in this fat liberation, fat activist, and supposed body positive rhetoric, especially on the internet, they genuinely seem to believe that thin women are just hanging out together, probably in a dark room, twirling their hair with their little thin privileged fingers, and deciding how they're going to destroy plus-size people's lives. These fat activists cannot fathom the idea that people are just living their lives, likely without even thinking about them in the first place, but giving them a second thought, right? I might see you for a split second and then never think about you again. Instead of settling into this realization of how life actually works for most people, what they've chosen to do instead is turn this into a fantasy of oppression. And doing that allows them to just continue to make hours and hours of angry content. Ironically, though, in doing this and creating this fantasy of oppression and continuing to make this content the way that they do, what they've done, whether they understand it or not, is they've actually become the ones who are obsessed. They are so obsessed with thin people, specifically thin women. They're obsessed with what they're doing. They're obsessed with their bodies, and they're in everyone else's business. And if that is an irony, I don't know what is. All right, that is all I have for you all today. At this point, I am so curious to know what you think. Had you noticed this pattern of them consistently blaming thin people for all of their problems? To the point that they can't even make a simple statement to say, yeah, I do that because it's more convenient. No, instead, they're relying on this argument constantly of, well, I can't do that because thin people. I can't do this because thin people. It's very fascinating, so I'm curious to know if you've noticed it and what you think about it. Did you know that thin people were responsible for there being no plus-size clothing in thrift stores? And they also somehow single-handedly got Old Navy to backtrack on their plus sizes. Thin people have so much power, you guys. Did you know that? Were you aware? Please, 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 please tell me in the comment section what you think. I also need to know if you had the same thing as I did about Old Navy, because again, I don't know why this is the hill we're dying on, that thin people cared so much about Old Navy. Because I just can't. I actually haven't shopped in Old Navy in quite a long time, because to me, it's almost, immature doesn't seem like the right word, but it seems like I've outgrown it now as an adult, right? I'm not really looking at Old Navy as a source of fashion, especially for like business wear. So it just fascinates me that Old Navy is the hill we're dying on. I'm curious to know what you think about that, because it honestly did just absolutely tickle me. So please share your opinions with me. You know I love to read them, and I will be checking the comments as soon as this video goes up. So please, please, please leave your opinions for me down below. And for all my introvert friends out there who may not feel comfortable leaving your opinion in an internet comment section, I see you, I feel you. Go ahead and leave me some sort of drink emoji this week. I was thinking specifically Kool-Aid, and then I was looking at my phone and I was like, I don't know if there's a specific Kool-Aid emoji, but a drink emoji will suffice. Because the one thing we can say is these fat activists are really drunk on their own Kool-Aid. As always, thank you all so much for being here with me this week. I will see you in the next one. Bye.